Lap quilting is back. Sharpen those pencils, sharpen the scissors, and pre-wash the fabric. We're ready to go. The opening show is a preview of what you can expect on the whole series. Plus fan mail, a glance at some quilts from the past shows, and what to do with all those ties. Welcome to Lap Quilting. I'm Georgia Bonesteel, inviting you back to a new series on lap quilting. Yes, we are back with new ideas, fresh fabric, all different templates, and more tips, all with one thing in mind, and that's for you to learn how to make a quilt. And I bet you're going to get some sewing tips along the way. I have a letter from the Thimble and Thread Quilt Club of St. Louis, Missouri. They've written inquiring about my workshops and lectures, but they most want to know, is there going to be another series? Because they say quilters just can't get enough of a good thing. And that is why we're back. That is the premise for this next series. It takes me about 2 years to develop the shows, to create the ideas for each segment. In the middle of this production, I did have a little physical interruption this time. Last winter, I had an acoustic neurinoma removed from the back of my head. It was, fortunately, nothing more than a benign bump. But when they did that, doctors had to insult the nerves. So I say that the nerves on one part of my face are pouting right now. But I do feel especially glad to be back with you this time. Now, what can you expect on this new series? We are going to deal in our next show with something very dear to all quilters' hearts, and that's cotton. I have designed a quilt entitled the Cotton Bowl Quilt, complete with swag borders and even a bowl weevils. We are going to learn a new method called single surface applique. It's done with a satin stitch on the sewing machine. Now, this is definitely an enlarged pattern, and we'll be learning how to enlarge our patterns with such things as a pantograph. Then, our third show is entitled From Field to Fabric. We'll be going through not only the cotton field, but the entire production of our cotton fabric. And of course, that means ending with a bolt of fabric in the store. Our fourth show takes more of an inside look into, you remember, our spool pattern, our spinning spool pattern. Well, we have expanded that, and show number 4 is called Expand-A-Block, studying the different shapes of spools, old ones, new ones, short ones, little fat, squatty ones, and then we will learn many new spool designs. It's hard to believe that this particular pattern is the same as this one. This is a twist, a spool twist pattern. While we'll even be looking at how we can take those patterns and put them on, say, the bottom of a skirt. I like the idea of finishing all of our skirts on the inside with the overlock machine now. I'm convinced that these overlock machines were made just for us to do patchwork on the sewing machine. Not only does it trim as it sews, but it overlocks all those raw edges. Then our fifth show is entitled Grandma Taught Us How. Across this country, we are having quilt documentation and census that has been being conducted in many states, why as many as 15. We wanted to acknowledge this with a very favorite classic old-fashioned pattern called the album quilt or the chimney sweep pattern. From there, we will have a study in our 6th show of rectangles, but this time not with templates. We're going to get rid of our templates, and we're going to learn how to sew bands of fabric together. They could be wide ones, they could even be wool ones, and in doing that, we're going to create a Bargello patchwork. It is sometimes referred to as piecing and then repiecing your fabric. And then show number 7, freezer paper. Yes, I have been known to stop perfect strangers on the street to tell them, did they know that you can use freezer paper as templates in patchwork? I think you'll really enjoy this show. We'll be doing such things as pieced or stripped designs such as the Hey Diddle Diddle quilt. Then we'll be looking to other answers with paper when we attempt to take Madras plaid and put it into a pineapple quilt. This is not the real one, this is an old one, but the quilt is called Madras Madness. We'll be doing several segments that I have called Breaking the Rules, where we'll take such things as Madras fabric or even wool fabric and make a quilt. Then our next show is entitled Red, White, and Blue. That is show number 8. And of course, the restoration of the Statue of Liberty, our celebration of the bicentennial of the U.S. Constitution, all good reasons for making a quilt. We'll go right to New York City and see some of those magnificent quilts. We'll also be doing such things as bow cat and tie dog. They are very charming patterns that have been put into a baby quilt. Then, our show number 9 is entitled Kids Play. I should really call them young adults because they do a wonderful job at the sewing machine. We'll have a chance to go right into a classroom and see several young girls working at the sewing machine and creating this pattern called Stretched Stars. Then show number 10 is called Come Fly With Me. It is my little tribute to all the wonderful trips I have had around this country, all the travels that many quilters do, teaching and furthering the art of quilting. They are very open-minded and always eager to adapt and learn more. So I have taken, would you believe, 72 airplanes and put them in a sampler quilt. We'll be learning about perspective in quilting and also how to make all these wonderful airplanes. Then show number 11 is entitled From Our House to Yours. Yes, an all-time favorite, the house quilt. I call it the homestead pattern. We'll learn how to put this together, and it turns out to be a very graphic quilt done in just blue and in white. On that same show, we're going to cover something very, very interesting. I have found that with that freezer paper, we can adapt letters. So from A to Z, we're going to cover the alphabet in our pieced work. Then our show number 12 is called A Show of Hands. I have a chance to work with 13 ladies for one whole year, and you'll get to see the results of what I call the year quilt class. Our last show, 13, is called Wrap Up, and all the things that we miss showing you on the other shows we'll include in that show, plus a look at some of the more contemporary quilts being done here in North Carolina. And now let's take a look at some of our fan mail. I enjoy hearing from people across this country, and it really is interesting. We can break our fan mail down into 3 categories. The first group has to do with not only fan mail, but people that really are concerned about us slowing down, and we promise to do that. But remember, there's always the reruns. We really have enough for a 2-hour special in our short show, and we do the best we can. The second type of letter has to do with the people that just tuned in and they missed the whole series. What can they do? Or perhaps their sister in Houston wants to see the series. I would encourage you to get in touch with your local program director and request the show. And of course, if that request is backed with a few dollars, that will go to many other creative art shows, and that will be truly appreciated. Perhaps this is a good time to give you a little history or a rundown of our lap quilting series. The first 12 shows were done in 1979. They were done in 2 parts, and you could really distinguish them from the sets. The first set was a very rustic setting, and why I even had curled templates on that show, I was truly experimenting and learning how to work with patchwork. And I used a laminating machine, and some of the templates curled up. You do not want curled templates, ladies. Where to begin. In this case, with a double 4 patch. Now keep in mind, if we were just putting this much together, it would be just a single 4 patch, wouldn't it? But we're putting all of this together. Then that second 6 shows had a setting with angle wood. Welcome, Charlotte Quilters Guild. It's a real thrill to have someone here on the set with me. It's been kind of lonely here, and I'm looking forward to today's show and really talking about the art of quilting, connecting the 3 layers. I thought we'd take time to introduce everyone before we get into quilting. The second series was a very nice setting, but more like your living room. It has grown so the first time. Now just keep quilting. Because the way you can distinguish the shows really is the quilts that you saw and what we were teaching. On that second series, we taught the rooster quilt and also the attic windows. Then, on the next series, we had a very, what I would call, country setting. Perhaps you remember the String Along Lily and also Stars Over the Smokies. So that is our series. Now, the third type of letter that we get has to do with, you guessed it, old ties. The ones that are outdated, the skinny ones or the fat ones, and people have this sense of guilt about these old ties, and they want to know what to do with them. You know what I say? Let them go. Don't worry about it. But all kidding aside, I have taken a survey, and it's nice to think that not only can we do something with those old ties, or not do anything, but we can also acknowledge the crazy patch of long ago. For some reason, people do associate old ties with crazy patch, and they want to recreate that exact crazy patch quilt. Well, remember, ladies, long time ago, not only did we dress in these silks and satins, but we decorated that way. So it's hard to really reenact that quilt. One of the first quilts that I made out of the fresh old ties, I just did it at random in a triangular pattern, but what happened was I made a very big mistake. I put satin on the back of the quilt, and it was guaranteed to fall off the bed every night at 3 o'clock. It was very colorful, but it just didn't work. But in this survey, I want you to just go with me and follow down the line, and maybe you can find some ways to work with old ties. Of course, if you put them into a color scheme and save all the brown and blues, it can make a very nice vest. Or Christmas. Holiday vests look very nice in just all the bright colors, and black adds a lot to this type of vest. The gold lame thread looks very nice also. You might even think about the ties themselves. That wedge pattern could work very nicely if they were cut apart and sewn into almost a double grandmother fan pattern. This could perhaps be the motif over the headboard of your bed. I owe a lot to ties because when I first started doing patchwork, this is the sort of thing that I worked with. And it was fun making little handbags. They really did not come to life until I put the batting in them. That's when they had the wonderful dimension. I can honestly remember doing the embroidery work on an airplane once, and sitting next to me was a gentleman with the same tie fabric I was working with. He was a little skeptical of what he was wearing. Barbara Held from Long Island has truly updated crazy patch and ties. Look at the wonderful, beautiful bags that she does. She does wearable, unique wearable art, and it certainly is marvelous. Then, of course, it is nice to think about taking the old ties that perhaps were your husband's, just as Miriam Dean has done here, and making it into a nice wall hanging. This could be framed and used on the wall. I would encourage you, if you have old crazy patch, not only quilts or pieces, and you feel like no one is going to keep them in your family, give them to your local museum. Perhaps they can add a link into the history of the area, and it's especially nice to think that they can live where they were made. Or you might want to think about taking some of the old blocks that perhaps never made it into a quilt and having them framed, and of course use acid-free paper, and they would make lovely wedding presents. In this case, why, there's a coffee cup and different silhouettes of flowers, so they might have a special meaning to someone. You might even think about just placing them on the wall. Sometimes that could be a very nice decor. Penny McMorris has done a wonderful insight into crazy patch quilts in this book, and I think by reading this we get more of a feel of the history of crazy patch. Of course, there's always the very special teddy bear, the one that you just look at and don't touch. Shirley Botsford has truly made Daddy's ties unique. Not only were these the full ties, but also Daddy's bow ties. And this is a very special garment that Shirley has made, adding black lace at just the right place. This has all been put together with gold thread and a zigzag on the machine. But look at the wonderful flare that this piece has. This is done by Shirley Botsford. Also, Fannie Hall has made this unique log cabin quilt, and this has a nice story to it. She tells me that the person she made this for stole her husband's tie one at a time, and until she had enough ties, and then she made this log cabin quilt. Now, what makes it unique, you can truly see that he is a sportsman, because fittingly enough, Fanny found this duck fabric for the back. It so happens that he was one of the co-founders of Ducks Unlimited. So this is a wonderful story. Also notice that Fanny used an orange peel quilting design for her log cabin, breaking away from the traditional straight lines and introducing that curve. I like to look at the way the flow of these tie fabrics just reaches right into our old crazy patch, the Victorian crazy patch. And now for the finale of our show. I'm very proud to present Pat Howder's piece entitled Crazy Crane. Pat has truly updated Crazy Patch. As you can see in the 8 panels, she has blended her beiges and tans, not only her cottons but her silks, and then has changed colors to the white and the ecru the minute the silhouette of the Crazy Crane emerges from the whole design. Notice that she not only uses a varied stitch in each connection, but she has even introduced boggles, beads, and even little bells in the whole overall scheme. An attempt at this sort of silhouette crazy patch can be seen in this eagle motif, actually from the floor mat of the U.S. Post Office, but this will give us an insight and a review in Crazy Patch. Where do you go once you have your design? And of course, if you didn't want to use an eagle, you might think about a bank motto, or perhaps your favorite pet, or a camp motif of some sort. But whatever you decide upon, it has to be placed on paper. Then it needs to be traced off onto the size fabric or wall hanging that you want to put this on. Make sure that your fabric is clean. It could be some of your miserable fabric because it is the foundation fabric and it won't be seen. It's going to be covered with Crazy Patch. Then your next step is to get all those ties, clean them, cut out the chicken soup at the end, and segregate them into colors. It might be all the reds, all the eagle colors in one pile. In fact, somewhere I've even found a real pretty yellow that would, here it is, that would be nice for the beak. Then all the blue colors, the background colors, need to go into another pile. Once those have been sorted, then you can start cutting them up. Now, I wouldn't have one great big tie and then a lot of little ones. Think about your proportion as you cut these up and position them. Crazy Patch can really be done 2 ways. I prefer the sewing machine, but I wanted to show you really the simplest form, and that would be to take those random pieces and simply overlap them. In this case, and of course, use the back side. Wrong is sometimes right. You can simply flip that over, turn under the raw edge, position it in place, and then baste that. Once it's been basted, then you can come back with an applique slip stitch or maybe just your decorator stitch right on top. The important thing for doing a silhouette design is that when the sky comes to the eagle, all of a sudden you're going to change colors. Now, I got lucky here when I was picking out my tie fabric, and as you can see, in teaching you the machine piecing with the Crazy Patch, I have found a tie fabric that has the brown and the red, and then all of a sudden it switches to blue, so that's my number 1. I simply position this on the center, and it would be important to start in the center and work out. Then number 2 has been simply sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can backstitch and flip that back. All of a sudden I can see the tail of the eagle, and that's going to be positioned right here. Now that has a little swoop with it. When I get ready to do my next eagle fabric down, I could introduce the flexicurve. Remember how we learn to sew and flip our curves. The next piece here has been number 3. As you can see, I've sewn and flipped that back. Number 4, I need to cover that gold because I don't want that. I want that to stay dark because all of this is my eagle. So then I take and will position that just covering the gold, and I'm going to sew that on the sewing machine. That's my number 4 piece. And once I start that sewing, and I'm using white thread so you can see it, but I would start and backstitch. And once you do that all the way down, you're ready to flip that back. Now you do create somewhat of a problem when you do that because I couldn't sew that right angle, and when I flip that back, all of a sudden you're going to say, well, now what do I do with that if I want to do it on the sewing machine? I would suggest using the blind hem stitch on your machine. It's a wonderful way to go ahead and anchor that in position, especially if you use a monofilament thread. Now, before I change threads, I wanted to give you one more tip. In this instance, I have one long line that I want to sew and flip. Rather than use one material that'll kind of look like you're cheating, go ahead and simply sew two pieces together. In other words, you're not going to be putting that on the actual material. You're going to come over and sew this together first, and that's going to create that look of a chopped up piece. But that works very nicely because you know eventually you're going to anchor that with a decorative stitch. So then you can come, sew, and flip that back. Now, this particular line right here, I would like you to use the blind hem stitch on your machine. It's that same stitch that you would use, say for instance, on the bottom, the inside of your skirt or your trousers. It's 4 straight stitches and then a little zig over for your zigzag, 4 more. And what it's doing is just catching this stitch. If you move your needle position, you can even come in very, very close. And that would anchor that in place before you can put a decorative stitch on that. In order to do this stitch, we're going to change and put some monofilament thread on. That means taking off your foot and threading a needle. I like the monofilament thread because it practically loses itself on the surface of the material. And I want to give you 3 tips in order to thread the needle. These are the latest tips I have heard. Sometimes this can be the biggest problem in doing our sewing at the machine. You can try licking the back of the needle. I've heard that works very nicely. You can also try to take your thread and position it with your 2 fingers and then attack the needle in that instance. If all else fails, you can try a needle threader. And let's see if this will work today. You take and insert it, and then by coming down the shaft of the needle, you can just feel it the minute it comes all the way. We missed first time. Let's try a second time. Come all the way down, and you can just feel it when it hits, and sure enough, it's come all the way through. Once you've done that, you're going to put your blind hem foot on. In one case, it might be a simple black bar, or it might be a plastic bar that is going to grip the material. I used it in the Eagle design quite a bit before I did my embroidery stitches in order to just anchor this in place, especially where I got up the creek. Now once that has been pinned, and I would try and keep that as straight line as possible, it just needs to be anchored in that manner, then you're ready to come and put your stitch on, which would be your blind hem, and you can even position the needle over a little bit more and even make your stitch a little bit narrower so that when the zag goes over, it doesn't go into it also so deep, and that makes it very nice. All the way down and back, and you'll hardly be able to see this because we have used the monofilament thread, and then back stitch. And I would do that over your entire piece wherever you had a problem. In fact, where you did this original positioning of the sky material, you could come back and simply use the blind hem stitch with your monofilament thread. Now to finish this design, once your crazy patch has been completed, you could use a thin polyester batting underneath, or even a piece of wool, some thin wool. I would place that under the entire piece and then do any quilting that you would like to. I have used the decorative stitches on the machine rather than doing it by hand. It does make it a speedy project. I did the eagle itself in black because I think that brought out the design. Then the sky, I turned to different shades of blue. In order to frame the design, I went ahead and then pulled this with just thread all the way across the back side. And I think that's a very nice way to hold your design taut on all the way around and yet not use any pins or needles, and that anchors it. It can be removed easily for cleaning then. I hope that you will update your crazy patch and turn to the 20th century and save the old ones, appreciate them for what they were, but take a new slant on crazy patch. Now next time we're going to learn single surface applique, and you have a supply list. You need to come to the television with a piece of tracing paper, one to cover the entire picture the center part of your TV, a pencil, and some Scotch tape. You're going to be getting the pattern yourself. We look forward to seeing you next time on Lap Quilting.
Lap Quilting with Georgia Bonesteel is made possible by grants from Family Circle, the world's largest selling women's magazine; Ginger Incorporated, makers of scissors and shears for home and industry; and VIP Fabrics, a division of Cranston Printworks Company, America's oldest textile printer. Georgia Bonesteel is the author of Lap Quilting, More Lap Quilting, and Georgia's New Ideas for Lap Quilting. These books are published by Oxmoor House and are available in libraries and bookstores nationwide.